All right, welcome law students and legal scholars to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into Metode, Ilmu, Negara, or the methods of state science. Now, let's establish right up front what we're actually doing here. We are going to break down the highly complex research methodologies that scholars use to study the concept, the origins, and the sheer mechanics of the state. I mean, think about it. How do you even study something that's literally everywhere but physically invisible? Well, this presentation, which was carefully compiled by the Legal Studies Material Drafting Team, is going to give you the exact analytical tools you need for your academic arsenal.
Okay, let's dive into our syllabus for today's module. We'll be hitting 5 main areas. First, an introduction to state science. Second, the normative and juridical approach. Third, the empirical and sociological approach. Fourth, descriptive and comparative analysis. And finally, we'll wrap up with the bibliography.
All right, Section 1, Introduction to State Science. So before we can even start debating how a state should operate, we have to pause and pose a really fundamental problem. How do legal scholars begin to study something as massive and abstract as a state? It's not exactly a physical object you can just slide under a microscope, right? To answer that, we have to look at the foundational definition of state science, or Ilmu Negara. As emphasized by renowned scholars like Roelof Kranenberg, before we look at the specific concrete laws of, say, modern-day Indonesia or the UK, we first need to understand the state in its purest, most universal form, completely detached from any specific time and place. It's about asking the ultimate questions. What actually is a state? Where does it come from? And what's its fundamental nature? Moving right along to Section 2, the normative and juridical approach. Now, what's really interesting about this is that once we have that universal foundation laid, we immediately hit this grand conceptual divide in how scholars actually approach the topic. In state science, there are essentially two massive competing lenses. On one side, we've got the normative juridical stream. This lens treats the state purely as a legal document. It is all about the constitutions, the regulations, and formal norms. On the totally opposing side is the empirical genetic stream, and this one treats the state more like a living sociological organism, focusing on reality, human society, and historical facts. To really wrap our heads around the normative juridical approach, we have to talk about the legal titan himself, Hans Kelsen. Kelsen was absolutely unwavering in his conviction here. For him, the state and the law are basically the exact same thing, no difference. He argued that studying the state can only be done using this normative method, completely free from any other abstract or social sciences. So, if you want to understand the state, Kelsen says you don't go observing human behavior. No, you look strictly at the Constitution and the hierarchy of legal regulations that actually draw the state's boundaries. And operating right within that highly structured mindset, we also have George Jelinek incredible contribution, the systematic method. Jelinek didn't just want to read the laws, the guy wanted to categorize them. This method involves compiling vast amounts of historical materials about the state, stretching all the way back to ancient Greece, and organizing them into this highly structured analytical system. It is literally the ultimate organizational tool for legal scholars trying to make sense of thousands of years of statecraft.
Which brings us to Section 3, the empirical and sociological approach.
But here's the catch. What happens when those neat, tidy laws on paper just don't match the chaotic reality of human society? This brings us to the sociological approach, which is captured just perfectly in this quote by sociologist Robert McIver. While Kelsen saw the state as the ultimate legal framework, the empirical stream views the state merely as a secondary tool. The primary reality, that's human society. The state was created by society, for society, to perform specific functions. So the crucial point is, if you only ever look at the laws, empirical scholars argue you're missing the actual humans who are pulling the levers of power.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into descriptive and comparative analysis. Okay, so we know the big theoretical streams, but how do you actually sit down and research the state today? Well, we start with the descriptive method. As defined by scholars like Sir Jonas Sukanto, this is your vital foundational step. Because before you can go out and test some grand hypotheses or write a brand new legal theory, you have to accurately map out the facts. The descriptive method is all about providing data as meticulously and accurately as possible regarding human conditions, state phenomena, and current realities. It's that rigorous groundwork you absolutely need to strengthen old theories or confidently build new ones. Next up is the historical method. Look, you really cannot fully comprehend a modern constitution without understanding the centuries of conflict, evolution, and growth that forged it. This method explains the essence of the modern state by deliberately tracing its roots backwards.
By analyzing the past forms of a nation, legal scholars can decode exactly why a state's current structure and functions operate the way they do today. It's like putting together a massive historical puzzle.
Taking this a step further, we have the comparative method. This is essentially an extension of the historical method, but instead of just looking backward, we're looking outward. Scholars using this method systematically cross-reference different states, side by side. By comparing the constitutional structure of, say, Indonesia with the United Kingdom or Germany, we can identify global patterns, we can pinpoint distinct national differences, and we can uncover those universal truths of state science that Cranenberg was searching for in the first place.
Finally, Section 5, the bibliography.
Now, the theories and methods we've just unpacked, they aren't just abstract ideas floating in a vacuum. They are underpinned by rigorous, century-spanning literature. As you can see here with these compilations by institutions like Universitas Andalas, robust legal scholarship is always built upon a deep, verifiable foundation of peer-reviewed literature and historical texts.
And if you really want to master this subject, these are the titans of state science whose books form the absolute backbone of this curriculum. We're talking about Suihino's comprehensive Ilmu Negara, Kelson's General Theory of Law and State, Jelinek's classic Allgemeine Staatslehre, and Miriam Budiarjo's foundational political science texts. I highly encourage every single student watching to not just rely on summaries. Go read these original texts directly. Seriously, engaging with their primary arguments is how you truly sharpen your legal mind. Now, as required by the academic drafting team, please note this official disclaimer. This explainer serves as an official online teaching medium, and it's designed to be a primary reference for university students and dedicated law learners. It is a formal part of your academic progression in mastering the legal sciences. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a weighty, somewhat provocative question to debate in your study groups. We've seen both sides of the coin today. So tell me, if the state is fundamentally an abstract entity shaped by human behavior, can Hans Kelson's strictly normative juridical method ever truly capture the reality of a state's power without eventually looking through a sociological lens? Or does injecting sociology into law just blur the lines of justice? Think critically about how these methods clash and how they complement each other. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the structures of power around you.